Bullshit.
It's the No BS Marketing Show. I'm Mike Gaddy filling in for Dave Mastovich as he is out in sunny Las Vegas, Nevada on a speaking engagement. So while Dave was out in Las Vegas, he was inspired to challenge the Massolutions team to choose their favorite podcast episodes, head down into the studio here at our offices, and cut an intro and talk about why you like that particular podcast. So if any of you know me, I immediately saw that email come in and thought, oh shit. But I've want to give credit to Dave though, because this has turned into a great way for me to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so that being said, the episode I chose to highlight on today's show is episode number 46 with Chuck Gounaris. Chuck is Dave's Vistage chair and a quite successful strategic consultant. So if anyone listening is thinking, how do I become a strategic consultant? I'd recommend you tune in and listen to the remainder of this podcast, as well as go and check out the full episode at www.massolutions.biz/ChuckG. In the clip I chose, Chuck talks about his career journey, and more specifically, he talks about working for Ross Perot, witnessing cultural shifts at large corporations, which is quite a feat if any of you out there work at a large corporation. And then finally, he talks about working at IBM when they were going through a transition phase and just had started thinking about it and then eventually launching their consulting business unit.
We got to dive right in because there's so many things to talk about. Well, let's start off with a fun one. Ross Perot at EDS. Now, we're in a presidential cycle here in which it's similar to 92.
Yeah.
And when Ross Perot ran for president. So I guess I just want to ask a little bit about how often did you see him around? How much interaction do you have? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, he was a really, one of the things that I learned from Ross Perot, and I saw him a number of times. I ended up way back when Ross decided he was going to go into government services, and they asked around the company, anybody want to go to Washington, D.C. to work? I raised my hand, and 4 weeks later, I'm in Washington, D.C., finding a place to live and ready to go. It was great. It was a wonderful time in my life. And I saw him a number of times there. What I liked about Ross from a leadership was his leadership style. He was just a guy who kind of was very good at being able to paint a vision and having everybody that worked for him in the organization believe that we could do far more than what we thought we could do for ourselves, just by working together, that we were better than any of us imagined that we were individually. And so he just kind of raised the bar and managed to get us to do some things that many people thought were impossible. And I think it was purely because of his leadership style. He was a very good leader.
So when you say you went to D.C. and worked in government services, that wasn't the campaign?
No, the campaign was after I was at EDS. It was much later. So I only know him from a business. I mean, I'm familiar with him whenever he was running for office because he had a lot of the same mannerisms and attitudes. Take charge. Yes. We can knock it down. We can do anything, and those same behavioral profiles that you saw then were how he led the company.
Interesting stuff. Did you vote for him?
I'm not going to answer that.
So we have another Ross Perot type in this year's campaign, Donald Trump, and their messaging is what gets them, their leadership style and their messaging is what gets them to where they have a chance at the big prize. So then you go into GPU,
yes.
And the phrase that I wrote down as you were talking was you were driving cultural change, and that really rings true to me because you talk a lot when you and I have conversations about cultural change. So that was one of your early experiences with driving cultural change. Talk about GPU's cultural change.
Well, the interest that was going on at GPU at the time is that it was a combination of operational excellence and cultural change. Those two themes were the big themes. And what that culture, it was in a regulatory environment, that culture was pretty much a command and control. It just kind of like somebody above said something and people just went out and did it. And when I came in, it was really about starting to say, hey, let's just set a vision for where we want to go. We want to accomplish we want to shift this culture so that we're able to be more of a high performance type organization and do things more cost effectively, do things very efficiently, and get ready for deregulation. So that means all of us have to weigh in on this. Just because I might be a leader or somebody above me doesn't mean we know all the answers. What it really became important to do is shift the culture so that we understood how to begin to work together in teams. And forget about titles, forget about, just get focused on how do we get to the end game. And that was a really exciting learning for me as I spent, 6 or 7 years there. And I think we had a very successful stint in terms of both driving readiness from an operational point of view, how work got done, how work flowed, and how we worked together and how the leadership team worked together. It was really great.
So we have listeners out there that they're probably saying, well, that's nice to hear, but maybe they don't believe it can happen. And I think since it was in a public utility, it would be even harder. It reminds me of in my nonprofit days when I was in a large nonprofit organization, we had to change culture. Talk about how you did it and give me a little bit more specific successes where you saw movement of the culture.
Well, it was a really insightful question that you had, because the fact is, at the end of the first year, right, I was used to being so energized, so excited, so enthused about how I could get things done at EDS that I was frustrated by the end of the first year, because I felt like there was always a reason why not, instead of a focus on how. How can we get there? And I wondered, as a matter of fact, at the end of that first year, whether I made a good decision to go there or not. Part of my decision was personal. It gave me an ability to get back home, and I had, get my kids back around the family, et cetera. But around year 2, it shifted. And what I learned is the importance of being able to have a shared vision as to where we were going. So we knew we had some specific metrics around operating cost and productivity and effectiveness, and also leadership readiness. So we had some specific objectives that we had to accomplish. And we developed a strategy that involved using changes in the way work flowed, information systems and technology, and really began to set up work teams that really embraced driving this change over a period of a couple of years. We invested very heavily in technology in those days and just radically changed the way work got done, all the way from the office up to the engineering staff, out to the plant locations. And along the way, really by getting people involved, people got more comfortable. They began to make decisions. They weighed in and offered their point of view. And I think we made better caliber decisions as a result of it, in terms of the direction that we were headed in. We had great results.
That's exciting to hear, because running into that roadblock of that's the way we've always done it instead of let's get it done, and you saw a shift. So let's move into one of the biggest names, one of the biggest brands in the history of branding, from a management standpoint, a consulting standpoint, IBM. IBM, maybe today it's not what it was, but in the 60s, 70s, even into the 80s, it was big time, one of the top 5 brands. It's still a very well-known brand.
Yes.
So you go there and you start you're with them as they're starting the IBM Consulting Group, and you ultimately became a principal in the consulting practice. That's pretty impressive. Tell us how that was in those days.
It's another interesting experience, because I had that same mindset, right? I had worked with IBM while I was at EDS. I had worked with IBM while I was at GPU, a number of other companies as well. And when approached with the idea of coming into the organization to help build the IBM Consulting Group, it was known by about a half a dozen names, actually, over the first few years. But in the end, it became IBM Global Services. The thing that was interesting is when I got on the inside and started to look around, it was very different than the way it appeared on the outside. I mean, they did a great job in their messaging in terms of, we're the leaders, we know where we're going. Because when I walked in, after having had a personal computers that did all sorts of slick things, and they gave me a green screen terminal, and I said, this is IBM, it was a real shock to me for a little while. But in fact, what the leadership said is, and the other thing that was really interesting, by the way, is 2 months after I was hired and started, the hiring freeze happened. And it was the beginning of Gerstner coming in and unwinding the old IBM in order to prepare for the new IBM. So I was right at the front end cusp of that. In fact, it probably took a year before that momentum really got to going. What I learned there, and it's really very relevant to what you do, Dave, is that over the period of Gerstner's term, what we recognized is that IBM took its eye off the marketplace. They got very confident and very comfortable in the success of the past. So there were some cash cows that were in the hardware business and the software business and other dimensions of it, and they lost sight of the market. And the market was saying, we want things to be easier and simpler, et cetera. And the view was, and so to net it out in the end, there was a major gap between what IBM was offering in hardware and software technology and the solutions that customers wanted to be able to operate more efficiently, to be able to execute strategy. I mean, it just, when I think back over my career, all these things tied together. It almost was as if somebody was designing the fact that I started it with Perot at EDS and learned some things, and then went to GPU and then went to IBM, because it was all about how do you deliver solutions and do it in an effective way. How do you provide leadership to that? How do you work together in teams to get that end game done? And how do you really transform businesses? And it took 10 years. It was the 5th to 10th year before we really figured it out. I mean, it was a lot of struggling in the first couple of years, because I don't think people took IBM very seriously in those days, because they didn't pay close attention to the market. But once they figured out that was the problem, and we really got ourselves aligned with the marketplace and let the market drive the direction that we were going in, we saw tremendous growth. And I think that growth continues, although today.
And it's about understanding your market and listening to them. So when I look at your career path, and I want to make sure we spend some time on this, and we'll tie it back to PI, because you did it without PI. Mm-hmm. But what I've found fascinating with the guests of the show, and even when I look at my career, it looks like it makes all this sense, and you're like, wow, this guy did what he should. Like when you look at my career path, it makes complete sense. I got to where I am. Yeah. But while it was going on, I had no clue. I had no clue. Yeah. So I want to make sure everybody understands that, because even these, you're a big name guy, and I get these guests come in, and Suzanne's here as our producer, and I look at her career path, and I swear it looks like it was all mapped out to be right here, because we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, but along the way, you're not quite sure.
Absolutely. A lot of that.
What a great episode that is with Chuck and Dave. Really enjoyed listening to their stories about their career journeys, how they kind of ended up where they are today. Again, if you're looking to get into consulting, listen to what Chuck says. It's very interesting that the path people take to get to where they are today. And I think the full episode really highlights that. If you want to go listen to that full episode, again, the URL is www.massolutions.biz/ChuckG. And again, I'm Mike Gaddy of Mass Solutions, being forced to fill in as the No BS Marketing Show host while Dave is in Las Vegas. Remember to visit our website to sign up for our No BS Marketing Weekly Update. And also remember to ask yourself, what's the big idea? Build your story around the answer. And remember, it's all about bold solutions, no BS.